Digital transformation in museum, is it the royal road to go for museums for everyone? Well, digital technology wasn't introduced to museums in recent years, as you all know. It has been there for a while and has been helping museums immensely to enhance its functions. Online platforms have enabled us to provide information and share knowledge about the collections we hold at the museum. And furthermore, various digital communication channels have been helping us to overcome physical, geographical restrictions that exist between museums and their visitors. We're living in a world where we are in contact with a splendid advancement of a countless amount of digital contents, and I'm sure we will all agree that the museums are no longer trapped in a physical dimension of its size. As we plan and take steps on the digital transformation in museums, I think it is important for us to ask, are we fulfilling our social mission as collective institutions for everyone? There are people out there who suffer from the gap of digital technology they have in their lives, and this is because every individual possesses a different level of digital literacy. Even museums share all the powerful knowledge through their network and open up colorful contents in metaverse space for the people who do not know how to use an adequate digital device or to be part of a network infrastructure, for the people who don't have sufficient digital literacy, or for those who are impaired that cannot use digital tools. The digital technology that museums use only aggravate the inconvenience for those people, and sometimes the technology become completely useless. Of course, this digital inequality is not a social issue that came to us out of the blue. We have been discussing about the relations between one's digital literacy and their socio-economical background, level of education, and other social factors in digital inequality. The National Information Society Agency, NIA, in South Korea published the findings of their study about digital inequality in 2021. It states that setting the baseline of Korean citizens' level of digital information as 100%, vulnerable Korean citizens such as disabled, elderly, low-income family, farmers, and fishermen were about 75.4%, and their digital ability and uses stays around 60 to 70%. In other words, people in this digital vulnerable class cannot make full use of digital device, even if one is given to them. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was proclaimed back in 1948, stated that cultural facilities shall be accessible to every human being, including people who suffer from physical or mental difficulties. Unfortunately, we still cannot say that museums are opened as an open space, both physical as a digital space, where everyone can freely come and make the most of it. There is still room for improvement. According to the Article 3 of the Act on Guarantee of Promotion of Convenience of Persons with Disabilities and the Aged and Pregnant Women in South Korea, it stated that each facility owner shall install convenient facilities in a manner which lead disabled persons to travel to shortest possible distance when they are using public buildings and public facilities. Under the same Act, Clause 3 of Article 12 say each organization in charge of facilities shall submit a convenient facility installation plan, so barrier-free. And therefore, museums in South Korea acting as cultural facilities, installing braille blocks and textual app signposting are mandatory. However, such the guarantee of promotion of convenience is limited to physical access up to the entry of museum building. For example, for visual impaired visitors, most cases, the only device they can use and find out about information of a museum is a textual app, signposting, which is outside of museum, and there are almost no tools available for them to utilize to find out about the actual exhibitions. And a few museum exhibition rooms are now introducing tactile type of display But even with this case, tactile type of display is often left in the corner, so far away from the context of the actual exhibition, which can only be received as greater inequality. So when we were preparing for the launching of the Seoul Museum of Craft Art, we wanted to make sure the blind people can walk around this place without any sense of restriction and fully enjoy their experience and learning, just like any other ordinary visitors would be entitled to. Furthermore, since it is a craft art that we are dealing with, which is formed by the touch and feel of human hands, we also wanted to emphasize on the importance of tactile perception in a more meaningful way. So in doing so, we have developed 11 tactile stations and installed them by following the pathway of permanent exhibition rooms at the Seoul Museum of Craft Art and introduced audio guidance systems for all our exhibitions. And what is interesting about developing tactile stations and the contents for audio guidance was that first time, we actually involved visually impaired visitors and experts in special needs in education, along with various professionals who is expert in human communication as part of the very first attempt, if you like, very first collaboration. So the tactile exhibitions are important as it is not only for visually impaired visitors, but everyone paying their visit to the museum. So it is fully inclusive. That's exactly what we want. This is the very first step the Seoul Museum of Craft Art has taken, but we know amongst the many more for us to make, and we're just starting on it. And in terms of digital accessibility of museums that we've been talking about, the accessibility to museums' websites are a legal requirement in South Korea. So each museum collection institute is obliged to provide solutions to meet the requirement. But the accessibility itself is expanding. The notion is expanding. It is no longer limited to the access to a museum's website, as various forms of digital media are used in exhibitions, training, learning, promotion, and other museum activities. Using a kiosk to purchase museum tickets is not only mentally exhausting for disabled visitors, but for elderly visitors who are not familiar with the machine. So digital screen exhibitions shown in an exhibition hall, all focusing on mere visual images, can be totally meaningless for those people who can't really see. Virtual learning programs some museums are offering can leave out the less privileged citizens who have no access to fast internet connections or devices. When parents or guardians don't have adequate digital literacy, obviously they can't help their kids to participate in this online learning program, although there are programs available, especially with the rules of less contact to minimize the spread of virus and digital transformation of museum moving forward, a more visually image-oriented online display. These have cut off visually impaired people from being part of communication. So social media contents and virtual displays that museum pour down to visitors under the pandemic, it mainly targeting young people. So it can exclude the senior citizens. So there are digital gaps existing with various reasons we need to pay close attention to and seek for solution. And how are we going to improve digital accessibility? then we do need a technical solution, but also additional budget, human resources, time, and more effort. For that, museums are often considered as not necessarily a top priority. But when we think about the role museums play as a center of human social activities, museums' digital accessibility is an important issue to be solved in this digital era we are living in. So we do need to ask, is enhancing physical digital accessibility leading us to achieve inclusivity of museums? Accessibility is more of an outcome-oriented approach where we ensure everyone can use digital products or services without having difficulties, whereas inclusivity is more of a process-oriented approach, a broader concept, I would say, where we bear in our mind of a variable environment, situations, and context for different users. In order to establish accessibility, it is important for us to consider how everyone can use products and services without having difficulties by referring to the guideline of industry and government, and by counting on different type of people, such as sensory and body movement, their individual cognition, and their different level of communication skills. But for inclusivity, as any user can face difficulties depending on their own situation or environment during the design phase, we need to take a cultural, social context elements into account. Also, for an inclusive design, along with objectively measurable areas, we do need to include emotional, subjective elements too. So the context or program of digital technology can be shared, appreciated, and provide a brilliant experience to everyone. For example, a participant group of people may feel unwelcomed in virtual world, perhaps due to discrimination, perception, bullying, and what have you. And through an inclusive approach, we should be able to solve this issue. So I believe a digital gap cannot be resolved simply by having better technology or design, but it shall invite everyone relevant in discussion, such as user, family, school, the local community, even policymakers. And we should all try really hard to build up an inclusive culture where no one is left behind. And what role do museums and libraries play in our society in this digital era? It is important. It is a valid question. As we are entering a post-pandemic world, the social role museums can play as a bridge to bring various communities together is more valuable than ever before. So we learned that while people suffered from depression, also what we call it as COVID blue and anxiety, since social distancing prolonged as a new normal, museums supported all those people to keep their mental health intact and comforted them. Also, as a digital network museum acting as an educational facility, its social role is more critical and it is expanding as supporting the grown-up population's continuous professional development, CPD, and providing them place where they can chill out and and they spend when they are free. So museums and libraries are now function as a vital social infrastructure than ever before. The International Council of Museums is actually looking into how to redefine what a museum is based on the fact that today's museums contain inclusive, multifaceted characteristics and also the social role and functions that they are carrying out. Museums are an open place for all communities. All human beings should be entitled to enjoy information, exhibitions, educational programs that museums offer. Museums should act as a social institution where different people and different communities can have meaningful interactions and become together. It is inevitable, therefore, the digital space of a museum must be designed in a way that all citizens can freely use, but more importantly, for museums to function as an essential social infrastructure to bring our inclusive vision into reality. For that, digital technology is a must. The purpose of a digital transformation of museums is way beyond merely supplying information, knowledge, experience to the users from museums or libraries. And it is important we all understand that. That means the various technologies that are currently available, such as you can talk about data informatics, VR, AR, artificial intelligence, digital twin, metaverse, NFT. All these digital technologies, when we use them to embrace ordinary, impaired, different generations and use them to communicate and exchange without any barriers of cultural differences, with an aim to create what is truly everyone's museum. That is, I believe, when we will see digital transformation of a museum is truly with us. And I think that's why we are all together here. So with that thought, I think this project is extremely meaningful, and all those questions we are putting down on the table will have a fruitful discussion. Thank you for listening to my presentation.